Now, programming from the Illinois Channel, an independent, nonpartisan corporation formed to provide nonpartisan coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. For more information on the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.
Just ahead, Governor Rauner is joined by Wayne Rosenthal, the director of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and State Senator Dale Fowler, as the three announce the development of an off-highway vehicle trail facility in the Sahara Woods, which they say will create jobs and bring tourism dollars to the southern Illinois region. Then in 20 minutes, Corey Jobe, the director of the Illinois Office of Tourism, gives a presentation at the City Club of Chicago outlining the future initiatives for state tourism and the impact tourism has on job creation and the state's economy. Following that in 1 hour, we talk to Dick Lockhar, a 94-year-old lobbyist and World War II vet with over 60 years' experience in Illinois government as he approaches retirement. And finally, in 1 hour and 15 minutes, we run an encore presentation of our interview with Brooke Simpson, author of Ulysses S. Grant, Triumph Over Adversity, 1822 to 1865. That's all just ahead, after a brief word from one of our advisory council members.
Hi, I'm Dan Montgomery, president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers. More than 100,000 IFT members work each day in schools, universities, colleges, and state agencies across Illinois. They're professionals who teach our students, keep our public buildings safe and clean, and provide critical state services, and much more. As an advocate for our members, their professions, and those we serve, the IFT works in Springfield to support legislative policies that promote high-quality schools and public services. We also fight to protect collective bargaining rights for all our members and all working men and women. We do this through an organized program of advocacy and year-round monitoring of public policy proposals. And that's why the IFT is proud to support the work of the Illinois Channel, whose coverage connects us to legislative debates and committee hearings, as well as interviews with leaders on key issues like the state budget, tax policy, public pensions, and education funding. Funding education is one of the primary responsibilities of Illinois state government. So we should all pay attention to the policies being proposed and how they may help or harm our children's futures. You know, what's happening in the State House today directly impacts what happens in classrooms tomorrow. And what happens in classrooms impacts the future of our state and our nation for decades to come. I'm Dan Montgomery, president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers, and I'm proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Education Advisory Board. The Illinois Channel, it keeps us all connected.
Next, from Carrier Mills, Governor Rauner is joined by Wayne Rosenthal, the director of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and State Senator Dale Fowler, as the three announce the development of an off-highway vehicle trail facility in the Sahara Woods, which they say will create jobs and bring tourism dollars to the southern Illinois region. This runs about 15 minutes.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Wayne Rosenthal. I'm the director of the Department of Natural Resources, and this is an exciting day for us here. This Sahara Woods site is pretty ideal for what we want to do with it. To have this off-road trail system. This site was formerly a coal mine from the 1930s to 1995, and it was acquired by DNR in 1999 as a donation from Sahara Coal Company. So that's how we came about and had this site. We've done several mine reclamations in the past so we could use it for wildlife, and if you look back, the topography and the fact that a lot of this is unreclaimed, makes it ideal for the development for the off-road trails. You know, we're going to have some challenges, and if you look out, you know, here we could put down an initial intermediate or beginner's track because you can sit from this site and watch. So, you know, it's a place for people to go and come. So without further ado, I want to introduce Senator Fowler, who's the senator representing this area. And Senator, mic's yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Rosenthal. Thank you so very much. This is a fantastic day for Saline County. This is a fantastic day for Southern Illinois. This just enhances the proactive tourism initiatives that we're instilling here in God's country in beautiful Southern Illinois, showcasing all the amazing treasures that we have to offer. The fact that this site with over 4,000 acres, approximately 1,500 acres of that is going to be converted over to off-highway vehicle trails, which is going to encompass approximately 26 miles of trails. There's no question that this will enhance economic growth in the area. It will bring more family-oriented initiatives to Saline County and to Southern Illinois, where people can bring their families and be able to have a lot of fun right here at this beautiful park. You know, this has been a park that, you know, it sits off the beaten path a little bit, but it's showcased here today, and I just want to say thank you all so very much for being here. I want to thank our friends from Illinois Department of Natural Resources for all their hard work and all the proactive initiatives they've taken to put this together today. And Eric McCluskey, I've got to give a little kudos to you over there, Eric, your site superintendent here at the park. Thank you for holding the rain off for us and taking care of us today. Really appreciate that. But this is going to do nothing but help enhance our economic initiatives here in Southern Illinois. And we still have a long way to go, but we're going to continue striving to continue to showcase all the beautiful treasures that we have. It's fun for me, you know, traveling around as the state senator of the 59th District, talking about that we live in some of the most gorgeous country right here in the entire Midwest and what we have to offer. And I also want to thank our friends from ABATE that are here, and Hunter John that's here from ABATE. Thank you ABATE, for being here as well. We really appreciate that. But this time I'm going to turn it over to Governor Rauner. And Governor, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to be here today, to be able to showcase this beautiful state park and then the opportunity that lies here. So at this time, I'd like to introduce to you our Governor of the state of Illinois, Governor Bruce Rauner.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. This is a great day for the people of Southern Illinois. This is going to be a beautiful park. It's all about growing jobs in Southern Illinois. This is going to generate a lot of jobs, tourism, investment, visitors coming from all over the Midwest. It's also going to enhance the quality of life the people of Southern Illinois. Everybody can come on out and enjoy this beautiful park and get out and ride in this great site. This is the perfect use for an old, abandoned, and reclaimed coal mine site. Perfect use. And I got to tell you this, I'm excited. I want to be here on an opening day. My whole life I've been an off-roader. I love riding four-wheelers, three-wheelers, dirt bikes, side-by-sides, and I'm going to make sure we go out here today. I want to go out and ride around out here in the side-by-sides. This is going to be a lot of fun, great family outdoor activity, and it can also enhance access for during the season. For some period, we can get more access for hunting while we're here. You can get out and get around to do some hunting, which will be a lot of fun too. This is a great amenity. I want to thank everyone involved. This has been a great team effort. We got $1.2 million federal grant to pay for most of this. That's a big deal. $1.2 million federal grant. We also got $300,000 from our Department of Natural Resources for the state chipping in too. And this is a big deal. We got this all financed and it's ready to go. And it's going to get open, I think, in spring of 19. So 2019 is when we want to get this all done and opened up. So first of all, let's have a round of applause. Big team effort. Let's Wayne Rosenthal and Dale Fowler. Thank you. Great team effort. And I got my buddies at ABATE. I've been an ABATE member for a long time. ABATE, Hunter John, and the ABATE folks have been advocates for this for, 7 years. Persistence is the key to success in life. This is a 7-year effort. Let's have a round of applause for ABATE and all the leaders there that advocated for this. And thank you for you all, the all community coming together. This is about coming together. We're getting the federal government helping, state government helping, local officials, our mayors, county chairman. Thank you for being out. Big team effort. This is a great project, a lot of fun, helping create good jobs, improving the quality of life. This is a really big deal. So thanks for coming out, everybody. Let's get this project open. And I'll say this. I'm committed. This is the first project like this for off-road vehicles run by the state. Never been done before. State facility for off-road vehicles. We're going to try to get 2 more of these done in the future years, and I'm committed. So Hunter John, let's stay on this. It's going to take a couple of years, but we'll get this done. Let's get this open. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for coming out today. Again, thank you for coming out. This Sahara Woods Park for off-road vehicles is going to be a tremendous boon for the economy here in southern Illinois. It's going to bring a lot of good jobs. We're going to expand tourism, visitors. It's going to help the local motels and restaurants and all the other locations here in southern Illinois, in this part of the state, and Saline and Williamson counties and all around. And it'll bring more folks to get more exposure to this area. It's so beautiful, so much to do here. It's going to be wonderful for tourism and expanding jobs. It's also going to improve the quality of life for the people here in southern Illinois. This is going to be a great amenity for people of all ages to come out and enjoy the outdoors and enjoy their off-road vehicles. I'm a passionate off-road rider myself, dirt bikes and four-wheelers and side-by-sides. It's a lot of fun, and it's great for kids and it's great for everybody. So this is a wonderful amenity. This should open in 2019, hopefully the first half of 2019. Thanks to Wayne Rosenthal, the great people at our Department of Natural Resources in the Illinois State Government. We've been able to access a $1.2 million grant from the federal government to help fund this. We're also chipping in about $300,000 from the Department of Natural Resources to get this funded and open. So it's a wonderful project, going to be a great economic engine and a great quality of life. So thanks for coming out. And I'll do questions on any subjects that you want.
I'm Molly with the Southern Illinois. Do you know how many jobs this will create? Do you have an estimate on that?
I've seen different estimates, but I don't know. Wayne, do you have estimates?
Well, the construction phase, yes. Sorry. I don't think we actually know until we get through the design phase. And Bob Appleman here is with our office, and we have to go through the design phase. And this is just actually the first introductory say. We've went through all assessments. This is the location. And now we want input from different organizations on what do you want to see, because what we want to do is make this a site that people want to come to. That's a destination. They'll be here 2-3 days, and it drives economic activity within the area.
This is draws a few jobs, but it's not enough to replace all we've lost. What are you going to do to help this region?
Well, I tell you, Molly, this is what I'm fighting for. It's the reason I ran for governor. We have the best people in America. We have the best location of any state in America. Southern Illinois is perfectly located. We should be a major economic engine. We should be strong growing, and we're not. And we haven't been growing fast in Illinois for decades. We're always one of the slowest growing states in America. And there's no good reason, because we got great people, great location, great transportation, great rail network, great roads, great natural resources, great energy costs. We've got mining, we've got energy, we've got everything going for us, except, you know what? Bad regulations and bad taxes. That's it. That's it, 100%. That's why I ran for governor, to change it. If we could reduce the tax burden and especially cut the regulations, the red tape, we got twice as many regulations in our businesses as the states around us. We can be strong growing, and we can bring a lot of jobs to southern Illinois, a lot of economic opportunity for the whole state. Southern Illinois is particularly hurt. But you know what? Many sections of the state, Danville, Rockford, many communities, very high unemployment, some of the worst unemployment in the United States. We've got to change. That's what we're fighting to do. That's why right now I'm out traveling the state, getting out the message. We need to roll back the Madigan income tax hike. We need to empower our local residents to bring down the property taxes, because we have the highest property taxes in America. We need to cut the red tape and regulations on our businesses so we can compete with Indiana and Missouri and Kentucky and Tennessee and Texas. And we got to restore good government. I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican. We need the people to say we need democracy in Illinois. Let's get term limits on everybody. And let's get redistricting reform so we could actually have competitive general elections. We do those things. Southern Illinois will be strong economic growth and more opportunity, and the whole state will be strong.
We're talking about a lot of long-term things that take some time.
Not too long.
Short-term crisis playing out all over, but particularly in Carroll, Illinois.
Yeah.
People are being relocated
as
a consequence, in part, of these economic situations and other things. What are you going to do to address that situation? Does the state have a role in helping?
Well, state definitely has a role. It's primarily a federal issue. It's the Department of Housing and Urban Development has basically condemned a couple of those apartment complexes there. It's heartbreaking. Those folks who are there need new homes, and they've got to be relocated. The federal government, we've reached out. We've been in constant communication with the federal government on this. We're pushing them to move this along. We've helped them to get housing surveys, find where else we can move folks. We've helped them with economic development projects. I've been to Cairo twice. We're working with the mayor there to help him get economic development grants. And we're helping where we can. We've actually have our team working with the federal government. Congressman Bost has been particularly good. We've got members of our administration working with the congressman. We don't want to duplicate efforts, so we're stepping on each other. We do have a member of our administration on the task force that was set up by our senators, our U.S. government senators as well. We're trying to explore every option to help those individuals. But the reality is what we need is more economic opportunity in Cairo. I'm not ready to announce it today, but we've got several ideas that we're going to do from the state point of view to help bring more economic development there. And you and I can keep in touch. We'll be announcing that in the near future.
Calling a commission of some sort on these lower counties. I mean, they would all benefit from whatever you do, and any of them all benefit from each other. People commute to work regularly. Things have gotten so serious. Those stats are pretty heartbreaking, even to those of us who are familiar with the area. Is something that can be done? Specifically looking at that region.
Well, I tell you, what we need is the state to free up businesses to come here. I've got actually dozens of companies who want to come to Illinois. They want to come to Southern Illinois. But they say, gosh, you can go right over to Indiana. The property taxes are 1/3. The regulations, the workers' comp costs are 1/4. They say, we'd love to be in Illinois, but the costs are prohibitive. We can do this, and that's why it's so important that we get Springfield working for the people again rather than the insiders, the politicians are running the system for themselves. We do that. I will be in Southern Illinois bringing companies on a regular basis. I've already traveled around the country and I've gone to Japan and China, talked about Southern Illinois and the assets. We've got people coming. They want to come, but you look at the competitive structure of Illinois, compare us to Missouri, Wisconsin, Indiana. The #1 place where our jobs are moving is to Indiana, and they ain't going there for the weather. And they ain't going there because somehow Southern Indiana is better than Southern Illinois. It's not. We got harder working people. We got a better location, but they got better regulations and taxes. This is not, it ain't that complicated. So we got to fix this.
I have a question for Director Rosenthal. I'm Kevin with WSIU Radio. What are the plans for promoting and marketing this park here to get people around the world knowing about it?
Well, that's a good question. What are we going to do for marketing? I think that's, I'm a big
social media.
Oh yeah, we're going to use everything. So we are very tourism focused. The state of Illinois. We got a great department of agency for tourism within the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And I was chairman of the Tourism Bureau up in Northern Illinois around the Chicago area before I became governor. I'm a big advocate for tourism. It's a great economic engine. It's one of the fastest way we can create jobs. This won't take 10 years. We'll be getting dozens and I think hundreds of jobs very quickly around here because of the visitors coming to enjoy this park, the hunting, the outdoor hiking, and the riding. So this can move the needle very quickly, and we'll be promoted on social media, digital media. We'll be running ads. Southern Illinois is one of the most beautiful parts of the United States. People don't know. I mean, you get the pictures, the forests, the rivers, the hills here. It's gorgeous. And we need to get here folks who ride off-road vehicles like I do, but horseback riding, hiking, camping, fishing, hunting. We were talking about quail. I'm a big quail hunter. This is great. This is great hunting potential here. So it drives a lot of tourism, a lot of economic development. So we'll be pushing it. Yeah.
Last question.
Governor, I'm Andrew Feather with News 3. We talked with the comptroller yesterday, and she said that despite reaching out on numerous occasions, your office or you personally have yet to sit down with her to discuss anything to the state finances. Why is that?
Boy, our team talks to her all the time. I mean, I haven't particularly myself, but I've got our finance office and our staff talk to her all the time.
Why haven't you personally?
No need for me to talk with her directly. My team is talking to her all the time. I can tell you, this is important. We put a tax hike on the people of Illinois. I vetoed it, but it went in anyway. We're still running a $2 billion deficit. The fiscal irresponsibility of the folks in charge, Speaker Madigan, is outrageous. We have to fix this. Our unpaid bills are still going up. And we can't invest to grow jobs. We can't invest enough. We got a federal grant for this, but we could be doing more if we had balanced budgets, and we could be doing more if we grew our economy. And the comptroller and the speaker, who she really works for Speaker Madigan, they don't get that. They just think taxes, more taxes, higher taxes are the answer. It's not the answer. We got to grow good paying jobs in Southern Illinois. Don't tax people and push the jobs out.
But you don't think
Thanks, everybody.
The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members.
Hello, I'm Michael Jacoby, Executive Director of the Illinois Association of School Business Officials. Most people never look at a school and think of it being an economic enterprise that spends tens of millions of dollars every year. They look at the school as a place their children attend for education, or perhaps as a place to attend a local sporting event. But handling the business of education is the job of the school business officials. We're the ones that keep track of the millions of dollars that come in and go out. Our members face a myriad of issues that include financing new buildings, paying teachers and staff, tracking our pension costs, and supervising the many businesses that contract with local schools. And that's why I'm so happy to serve on the Illinois Channel Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel connects us with legislators working on educational issues in the state capitol, as well as covering educational issues being discussed at conferences around the state. As we see in the debate over pensions, the many details involved in just that one issue, we need a news organization that's willing to give enough time to cover an important issue in depth. I'm Michael Jacoby, Executive Director of the Illinois Association of School Business Officials. I'm also proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel, it keeps us connected to the issues that matter most.
Next, from Chicago, Corey Jobe, the director of the Illinois Office of Tourism, gives a presentation at the City Club of Chicago outlining the future initiatives for state tourism and the impact tourism has on job creation and the state's economy. This runs about 40 minutes.
And Jay, I'm going to take you up. I'm going to become a member. So I was delighted to be here for Marilyn's speech. Yeah, that's right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again to City Club for having me speak. I was telling Jay while we were having lunch, this has been something I've wanted to do ever since I became director of the Illinois Office of Tourism, because tourism is such a vitally important economic engine for our state. So it's quite an honor for me to be here today. Before I begin my formal remarks, I know we work very closely with the 40 certified convention and visitor bureaus around the state who day in and day out really help us spread the message and attract those quality visitors into the state each and every day. There's so many in the room. Could each of you stand up and let's give you all a round of applause, our certified bureaus that are with us. But thank you so much. And I'd also like to, there's Christine Dudley. She's kind of my, what better good news to have in the state of Illinois than tourism and film. And Christine does a fantastic job representing the film office, not only around the U.S. but around the world. So thank you for coming today, too. Thank you. I'd also like to thank my partner, John. I drag him out every once in a while to these lunches. He's got to put on a suit and tie. So, John, thank you for coming as well today. Well, it's not often that I get so many of Chicago's leaders, and especially stakeholders in one room, to talk about our industry. And I want you to know your participation with our office is essential to the success of our efforts. And I want to thank you for your partnership and your commitment as we continue to grow this industry. If there's anything I want you to take away today, it's that tourism's not only a great investment, but it's vital to the economic success of our state. Let's take a look. Did you know that right now the #1 business employer in the United States is the travel-dependent leisure and hospitality sector? That's a substantial position, but it hasn't always been that way. The tourism landscape has shifted dramatically over the last decade. In the tourism industry, we talk a lot about the traveler journey. So before we get into what we've been up to at the state level, I would like to talk to you about the important role and the backstory of the traveler journey of our nation. In 2009, the United States took its first step towards becoming a travel-forward destination when it signed into law the Travel and Tourism Promotion Act, giving the USA a national destination marketing organization, the Corporation for Travel and Promotion. In 2010, the U.S. took another step forward when the Corporation for Travel Promotion became the fully established destination marketing brand we recognize today as Brand USA. With a new name and brand identity came additional funding from both the public and private sectors and a more robust international marketing strategy, including research to support marketing at the state level. And the best part, this all occurs at zero cost to the taxpayer. Brand USA's budget is based on in-kind contributions from more than 700 partnering companies and destinations and matched with funds from a small tax levy on international travelers visiting the U.S. The Illinois Office of Tourism was one of Brand USA's founding members and remains to this day one of its largest supporters. There are some moving pieces at the national level when it comes to tourism efforts and funding, but we remain optimistic that the United States will continue to be a prime travel destination. The industry will work with elected officials across the aisle and within all levels of government to highlight our importance to both the U.S. economy and the millions of Americans who are employed by the travel-dependent leisure and hospitality sector. The U.S. Travel Association recently debuted a new report, Travel, America's Unsung Hero of Job Creation. This report revealed that 1 in 9 jobs in the U.S. are supported by the nation's $2.1 trillion travel industry. As America's 7th largest employer, the travel industry supports a total of 15.3 million domestic jobs and directly employs 8.6 million workers across the country. What's more, the travel industry creates jobs faster. From 2010 to 2016, travel employment grew by 17% versus 13% for the rest of the private sector. And it's just not major hotel chains or sites and attractions that are driving the travel industry job creation. The travel industry is the economic lifeblood of small business owners in the United States, which have driven the majority of U.S. job growth over the past several decades. You know, we should always listen to the data, and the data never lies. And what this data tells me is that our industry is essential to the success of our nation's economy. Regardless of decisions, travel and tourism is an ardent ally of the U.S. administration. We share the goals of our leadership, improve quality of life for U.S. citizens, and improve the economic position of our nation. Obviously, tourism plays a major role at the national level, but I wouldn't be here today if it weren't as equally as important at the state level. The Illinois Office of Tourism is currently funded 100% by the state's hotel-motel tax. By law, tourism is to receive 33.5% of the hotel tax revenues received each year. That's taxes on expenditures that directly affect our efforts. And we do a lot with that 33.5%, helping fund Choose Chicago and our 39 other Convention and Visitor Bureau budgets around the state as well. Furthermore, the Illinois Office of Tourism acts as the first touch point for travelers driving interest in Illinois' diverse destinations. A Japanese traveler, for example, might encounter the Illinois Office of Tourism through our international efforts, be inspired to visit Chicago, then research Choose Chicago for more information. And our efforts are driving real impact. Last year, Illinois welcomed over 112 million visitors. And those visitors are staying longer than ever before, which means more time visiting attractions, shopping, and dining establishments in our Illinois destinations. In the past 10 years alone, domestic travelers visiting Illinois increased by 19 million. Just think about that. Over the past 10 years, 19 million additional visitors. And last year alone, the tourism industry created 10,000 new jobs for Illinois residents, from lodging and food service to entertainment to retail and a variety of artisan small business entrepreneurs. And domestic and international expenditures are rising as well, reaching $37.9 billion in 2016, a $571 million increase over 2015. And it was all said and done, those visitor expenditures generated over $2.8 billion in state and local tax revenue, an increase of $122 million from 2015. That's tax revenue that our communities rely on. You know, I like to say that tourism is saving Main Street America. As we spend more and more of our shopping dollars online, communities throughout Illinois are suffering. Oftentimes, locals just aren't spending enough locally to keep doors open. But visitors love to shop. It's at the top tier of their travel itinerary. Many of our communities now count on this outside visitor spending to make up for the loss in local dollars. You know, fabulous Michelin star restaurants, the best shopping venues, your favorite cultural attractions, they all exist and survive on visitor spending. Jobs, community projects, social services, quality of life, they're all driven by tourism dollars, and that's very significant to remember. You know, hopefully by now I've convinced you that our industry is pretty important. So what are we doing at the state level to affect the record change for Illinois tourism? Let's take a look at our most visible initiative first. It's the Illinois Office of Tourism's flagship Up for Amazing campaign. Let's take a look. I always have to throw our Cubs in there everywhere I can get them. Thank you. These beautifully crafted campaign advertisements launched March 1st with the singular goal of inspiring travel in 5 key persona segments to authentic destinations throughout our state. Whether we're looking for an outdoor escape or our next great family vacation, we all travel for different reasons. Up for Amazing embraces those differences and challenges our audiences to pursue those authentic experiences that speak most deeply to them. Our 5 key personas include outdoor adventures, Chicago sightseers, international road trippers, LGBTQ city break aficionados, and family vacationers. With bold images and an original song from local Chicago group, The Gold Web, yes, that's The Gold Web, the Up for Amazing brand campaign articulates the pulse and authenticity of Illinois. The campaign ran in 5 international markets and 14 U.S. regional markets. And running through July 31st, this campaign was hugely successful, with just the digital portion of the campaign generating over $28 million in hotel revenue, and for every dollar invested delivering nearly a $9 return and economic impact for our state. Our fall campaign is having great success too. I can't believe fall is almost over. But let's take a look at what we've got in market still today for the fall. Released August 21st, this not only was our earliest fall campaign, it was also the biggest. We're currently running television ads in 9 markets throughout the Midwest and also running digital and social campaigns as well. It's still early, but the numbers are very promising. So far from the digital campaign alone, we've generated over $17 million in estimated hotel revenue. The first quarter of 2017 also saw the launch of our brand new award-winning website, enjoyillinois.com. The traveler journey is no longer linear. You know, once upon a time, there was an order to travel planning. You get inspired, book a hotel and flights, choose your activities, take the trip, show off your vacation photos. You know, it really made sense. But with the advances in technology today, that's all out the window. Travelers book hotels in trip, share content with friends in real time, and circle back for more inspiration. There's really no more order when it comes to travel. EnjoyIllinois.com has been our solution. The website is a multifaceted, created expression of the amazing Illinois brand, optimized to capture data and personalize the digital experience to inspire travelers to spend more time in Illinois. Often the first touch point for potential travelers, the new EnjoyIllinois.com website receives over 1.7 million visits per year, and that number is growing every day. As a top-of-funnel sales tool, EnjoyIllinois.com inspires travelers with tailored, user-friendly content and state-of-the-art listing technology that delivers better and more relevant information. Once on the site, visitors explore the state before they ever set foot in Illinois soil, finding inspiring trip ideas and blog posts detailing some of our favorite destinations. Through our robust content platform, EnjoyIllinois.com empowers travel planning pre-trip, in-trip, and beyond. You know, one of our most visited pages is a gateway to learning more about historic Route 66, which many of you know starts right here and begins in Chicago. Comparing recent performances year over year, EnjoyIllinois.com has seen a 331% increase in web users, resulting in a 17% increase in overall travels to the state, a 3% increase in accommodations and flight searches, a 21% increase in flight and accommodation bookings, an astounding 63% in total number of nights, and a range of data capture tactics have delivered a 447% increase in newsletter signups. And did I mention, EnjoyIllinois.com was recently crowned best travel website in America as well. Not too bad for the past 10 months. You know, the data confirms, oh, thank you. Yeah. I'm pretty proud of that. My team, I drive my team crazy. They know how proud we are of it. It's been remarkable what we've been able to achieve over the past 10 months. And the data confirms that websites are a must for destination marketing. And through savvy strategic thinking, we've developed a state-of-the-art tourism website that's delivering true ROI for the state. Another exciting initiative I'd love to tell you about, I'm very passionate about this, and it's our Illinois Made program. Skift recently reported that nearly 76% of all millennial travelers today want to have an authentic experience when they travel. From coffee roasters and beer brewers to hat makers, unique, vibrant, innovative small business owners all across our state and right here in Chicago are doing just that, creating authentically Illinois experiences for our visitors. The Experience-Driven Illinois Made program celebrates the makers, creators, and artisans who helped craft Illinois by hand. By promoting these authentic maker experiences, we drive visitors deeper into Illinois, increasing visitor spending and generating more tax revenue for communities around the state. And they're doing just that. Our Spring-Summer Illinois Made digital campaign alone generated over 21,000 hotel bookings and $7.5 million in hotel revenue. And every dollar invested returned $18 to the state. Now in phase 2 of the program, we just announced 40 new makers, all amazing businesses that are drawing visitors from around Illinois and around the world, creating jobs and growing our state's economy. Through our robust maker profiles, content, and trip itineraries, we can inspire travelers to venture deeper into Illinois, from everything from tasting authentic truffles in Springfield to indulging in a small batch whiskey from Whiskey Acres in DeKalb, which I have a video to show you today. Let's take a look.
So we are the first Illinois estate distillery. We grow everything. We control the entire process from seed to spirit. And you know, there's a real passion that a lot of consumers have for understanding how their food and their beverages are made. So we take about an hour-long tour of our facility. So it starts in the fields, and we talk about the crops and what we grow. We then adjourn to the distillery, where we actually talk about the process of making spirits. And then we finish with a visit to our barrel warehouse, and we get to taste the products. And people find a real connection with getting out of the city and getting into the country. And I think they really find it relaxing and peaceful and enjoy that.
And the group's intimate enough that we can answer questions. We get a lot of questions. And the exciting thing for us is, first of all, we're farmers. This is my 48th year farming here. And so it's exciting to do something value added that brings people out here to visit the farm and to share with them our passion now for taking that grain and doing something special with it.
And so we've been farming here since my grandfather did, and so we continue that tradition. But at the same time, there's this movement for this artisan, and we're proud to be a part of that. We are the heartland, we're authentic, and everything that we do is transparent, and it's right here in front of our customers. They can see it, they can taste it, and experience it right here with us.
I encourage you to take a trip. It's worth it. By continuing to grow Illinois Made, we will continue attracting visitors to explore Illinois beyond our gateway destinations, supporting local businesses and generating important tourism revenue for our communities. We also launched a campaign this spring specifically for the LGBTQ market, including for our first time a 30-second TV ad in 7 Midwest cities. Our goal here is to position Illinois as an LGBTQ-friendly destination, a sophisticated international destination in the heart of the Midwest. So to pay it off, we had an international campaign running in both the UK and Germany, both in print and digital, by highlighting Chicago's LGBTQ neighborhoods and sharing a host of small-town experiences outside of the city for more low-key experiences. This campaign also ran from March 1st to July 31st, and the digital campaign alone generated over 6,200 hotel room booking nights, over $2.2 million in revenue, and for every dollar invested delivered nearly $11 in return for the state. Internationally, the Illinois Office of Tourism is continuing its evolution. According to the U.S. Travel Association, the typical international traveler spends an estimated $4,360 when visiting the United States over an 18-night stay. Unfortunately, and for a variety of reasons, the U.S. has seen a dip in international travelers to the tune of 4.2% in the first several months of 2017. Some of that change can be attributed to exchange rates and the strengthening of the American dollar. And at the state level, we've also seen stagnant growth from our key international markets over the last 18 months. This, coupled with shifting perceptions of the U.S., is challenging us to look more critically at our international strategy. We currently maintain offshore offices in Japan, Germany, and the UK. These big three markets are our bread and butter in terms of international dollars and consistently delivering strong returns on investment. However, we realize that we'll need to cast our nets further if we want to see continued growth. That's why over the last several months, we've shortlisted emerging markets that we've identified as key growth opportunities for Illinois. And here today at City Club, you all have the privilege of being the first to learn that after extensive research, the Illinois Office of Tourism has selected China and Mexico for our expansion efforts, beginning with our very first in-country offices. While we've operated in these markets remotely for some time, growing opportunities and increased interest have made placing official Illinois teams on the ground really a no-brainer. Based on research provided by Brand USA, Chinese travelers are expected to spend an average of nearly $7,500 per international trip, with the greatest proportion of surveyed respondents planning to visit the United States within the next 6 months. Moreover, China is already quickly becoming our top overseas market, with continued growth over the next few years. Illinois, we were the first to partner with Brand USA on a branded campaign in China. We were the first state this past year with special emphasis where we focused on the city of Chicago and the connection to Route 66 as a destination. And Mexico respondents are already selecting Illinois as a top 10 preferred travel destination, with a majority planning a trip to the U.S. within the next 6 months as well. Once open, our new offices will be responsible for sales trips, in-country PR, and providing international insights to elevate our in-country media placements. If we could get these emerging markets to interact with the Illinois brand in a meaningful way within the next 4 months of their traveler journey, we have the opportunity to affect millions of dollars in increased economic impact for Illinois. This is all very exciting news for our office and a decision we're confident will contribute positively to this state and the many partners in this room and beyond that we collaborate year over year. So with all the exciting news, really the next question is how do we get there and how do we do this? How do we get international travelers to interact with Illinois in a meaningful way? In addition to placing media in country, we coordinate a variety of travel trade efforts to increase our product availability and brand awareness in international markets. You all probably are familiar with familiarization trips. A lot of you help us in this room each and every day. And we bring a lot of individuals into Illinois and around our state. Not only journalists, but trade groups from our key international markets all throughout the state and around Chicago. And we've been pretty busy this year. We've hosted a variety. We've hosted Chinese photojournalists. We've hosted a Marie Claire UK trip, a Japanese trade group, a UK trade group, an American Airlines trade fam from China, and most recently supported the second Brand USA mega fam. And in the wake of our 2017 successes, we've set a very aggressive goal to get 200 travel trade and writers to Illinois in 2018. And for those of you that aren't familiar with FAM hosting, that's a lot of people coming to the state, as my partners in this room will tell you and my team. It's a very aggressive number, but I know it's one we will achieve. In addition to bringing the world to Illinois through our FAM trips, we've been taking Illinois to the world. Our sales teams have been hard at work with sales and trade partner training missions in Germany, China, Japan, and the UK. And those are just some of the highlights. At the Illinois Office of Tourism, we have a lot of programs happening all year long to promote travel to Chicago and throughout the state. Let me share with you some things we have going on, and then I'll wrap up. We have a lot planned for the coming months, from international programs to new media placements throughout our domestic markets. Just next Saturday, we're taking Illinois to Piccadilly Circus as the presenting sponsor of the Regent Street Motor Show. Each year, hundreds of thousands of consumers gather in London to experience the best on four wheels. But this year, European car aficionados will get a special surprise when the Illinois Office of Tourism delivers a taste of the mighty historic Mother Road, Route 66. This high-profile partnership is a prime opportunity to promote Illinois' historic stretch of Route 66 and all the Americana flair international visitors travel to experience. You know, in Illinois, we like to consider ourselves as a welcoming state. We like people, period. The LGBTQ travelers consistently rank Chicago as a preferred U.S. destination, along with New York, San Francisco, and Las Vegas. To build on the momentum of our successful spring-summer campaign, we are moving forward with a new initiative with our local LGBTQ community at the center of it all. Illinois is home to amazing experiences in every corner of the state, from bustling cities to quaint towns along byways and our waterways. And we welcome everyone to fully experience these amazing moments and come away with an amazing story about those one-of-a-kind experiences that somehow tie us all together and remind us about a feeling we all search for when we take a vacation from the ordinary. Amazing for All will consist of a portrait and video series that will tie together our amazing LGBTQ community with their amazing experiences, sites, attractions, and destinations they love to visit. This is also the beginning of a much broader international diversity campaign planned for the coming year. The Illinois Office of Tourism exists to promote authentic Illinois experiences to all people. And we want all countries and nationalities to feel welcomed and invited to experience our unique destination firsthand. I've talked a lot today about the history of travel and tourism in the U.S., to our efforts at the state level to promote Illinois internationally. So I'm sure you've all taken good notes, but if you haven't, I'm going to leave you with three key takeaways or 3 points. First, Illinois tourism is an important economic driver for this state. Ultimately, our goal is putting more heads in beds and increasing hotel-motel tax revenues at the state and local level and more visitor expenditures in our communities. Second, Illinois tourism creates jobs and a lot of jobs. 10,000 new jobs last year alone is no small feat. Providing jobs for Illinois residents is something we're proud to do each and every day. And lastly, Illinois tourism must continue to innovate in order to drive increased economic impact for our state. The leisure travel landscape is changing rapidly. It's changing right here as we speak. And in order to thrive as a top-of-mind destination, we must continue to watch the trends and adapt our businesses and organizations to support a new generation of travelers. If you can remember just those 3 things today, my time with you here at City Club has been a huge success. And with that, I'll close out our time today. Again, Jay, thank you. And thank to all of you for coming today. It's quite an honor to have the opportunity to address City Club, and I'll end at that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll move that out of the way.
That's okay. Your water.
Yep.
You may be thirsty. But you're going to come back here, Corey. You know, we have a few questions, and if anybody has any questions they would like to ask. The first one is from Sharon Fine, who's affiliated with the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center in Skokie, Illinois. And her question is, do you work with other state DOTs, not Department of Transportation, to send a strong message to Washington? How does tourism drive our economy? How responsive is the federal government?
Great. I didn't see Sharon. Where is Sharon? Oh, there she is. Hi.
Oh, excellent.
You know, if I hope all of you have been to the Illinois Holocaust Museum. Sharon's a true champion. You know, the Illinois Holocaust Museum at Skokie is the 3rd largest in the world. The 3rd largest. And it's, if you have not been, it's a visit that you should make, and it's a visit that will leave a lasting impression. And what they're doing at the museum is remarkable. Sharon, yes, we do. We work on a couple of different fronts. We partner very closely with our Great Lakes states. So we are a member of Great Lakes USA, which is really encouraging travel from the UK, Germany, Japan, and China into the Great Lakes. As I said earlier, the international visitor typically travels 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And with us being home to O'Hare International Airport, it's a great pivot point. So we work very closely with trade efforts with our Great Lakes state partners. And then we also work very closely with the U.S. Travel Association. I'm honored to be on the National Board of Directors of the U.S. Travel Association. There are many state members on the board at U.S. Travel from around the country. And then there's also the National Council of State Travel Directors. There's only 50 of us in the country, so it's quite a group that face the same issues, problems, ideas, goals, achievements that I face and our team faces every day. So those 3 outlets, we work very closely to promote travel into the United States and with Great Lakes to promote travel within the Great Lakes states.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for asking that question, Sharon. And the next time you're here and ask a question, we hope to see that you're a member, or to ask if you're a member of City Club. You get 1 freebie, but after that, you have to pay up. We have some great questions here, Corey. This is from Andrew Mack with Mack Communications. Andrew, where are you? There he is. Way back there. Great. How does the lack of a capital bill and failing transportation infrastructure impact tourism?
Well, I'll leave those issues to the governor and the 4 legislative leaders, but it's our job to make sure that tourism is at the forefront in terms of discussions. You know, I report up to the directors at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. That's where Illinois tourism sets. They understand that the importance of the drivers around the state, you know, whether that's our great sites and attractions, whether that's various state parks and lodges, all these type of entities bring in those 112 million visitors a year. That number, the 112 million visitors a year, 87% of those visitors were here on leisure. So they're supporting a lot of sites, attractions, the museum campus, Navy Pier. You know, we heard from Maryland a couple weeks ago about the expansion efforts that are there, so that are ongoing at Navy Pier. These type of developments that are happening all around our state need help, and they drive major economic resources, visitor spending, overnight accommodations, the ripple effect that dollar has that's going into these sites and attractions, what that ripples out to in the local economy. So yes, tourism is a major economic engine. We let the Department of Commerce know that. They understand that. And there are a lot of sites and attractions around the state that need some help as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. This question is from City Club member Jim Aldworth. He's with the Chicago Fire Department. Jim, where are you? Excellent. Does the Illinois Department of Tourism, it's a very involved question. Okay. Does the Illinois Department of Tourism work with or support the EPA and other water quality agencies to ensure access to clean waterways, diverse aquatic biodiversity, and pleasant conditions for self-propelled watercraft? The water conditions seen in the video are not the same as viewed at the Hennepin Canal or at the Chicago Maritime Museum, particularly last week, off of Bubbly Creek. You know, they have a little oil leakage over there. Good question,
That's
Jim.
a great question, Jim. Oh, boy. Well, I can say that, I mean, and I appreciate the question because outdoor, you know, I went through our 5 key personas, and obviously outdoor adventures rank right up there in our top 2, actually, of key personas that we market to. And you look at all the natural resources around the state, whether it's Starved Rock or the Chicago River. You know, one effort that we're the promotion arm for the state, but we have recently been working with the Department of Natural Resources and other organizations here in the Chicago area with the Calumet Collaborative effort. And we're having a seat at the table just in terms from the tourism perspective and how we can better promote and educate visitors about the experiences they can have. But this is an issue. I go back to us 50 state travel directors around the country. The National Council of State Travel Directors have been wanting to have a more presence nationally about how we get involved in some of these issues and discussions. Sometimes this is our own faults of we're over-tourismed at times, and some state parks and our national parks are seeing that today. And how do we get ahead of that? And how are we a part of the solution up front when it's not too late to get involved? So we've started that effort here with the Calumet Collaborative effort, and I think you'll see more of that coming as the year goes along.
Okay, thank you. This is from City Club member Brent Hoffman, who's with the CAF, the Chicago Architecture Foundation. Brent, where are you? Great, over there. By the way, thank you for helping put on that wonderful open house this year as you have in the past. Question. This is the City Club. You never know what you're going to get. Does the tourism industry have a role in Chicago's bid for Amazon's second headquarters?
I see my boss sitting out there. She always tells me not to talk about Amazon. And no, Amazon is, you know, look, I personally don't have a stake in that, but I know our efforts at Choose Chicago, the governor's office, the Department of Commerce, Choose, and all the business organizations here. Obviously, quality of life will be, I'm sure, at the forefront and the center of it all. You know, when we host travel writers from all over the world that have never been to Chicago, they are shocked at how amazing and how such a world-class city we have. And obviously that'll be at the forefront of the Amazon bid. Tourism is a major economic engine. I always say if it wasn't for tourism, we probably wouldn't have such beautiful things as the Chicago River, the museum campus, the fantastic architecture tours. The list goes on and on and on. And tourism impacts that quality of life, and quality of life will be looked at during that process.
Great. And by the way, don't forget Cahokia Mounds and the Dana House in Springfield and all of those.
I agree. I love Cahokia.
This is from City Club member Ashvin Ladd. Ashvin asks, what are the growth opportunities for Illinois tourism? Investment, promotion on current attractions, new attractions?
Yeah. Well, we've got to continue. That's a great question. You always have to continue to invest. You always have to continue to search and invest in the next great thing. I know you're working on a major project that will attract a key demographic coming into the city and keeping visitors longer. That's the thing we've always, I talk a lot about when I'm out speaking to groups around the state about tourism infrastructure. And I don't mean roads and bridges, which they're important, but making sure that we're reinvesting in our sites and attractions, that we're looking for new product, because we have to continuously be thinking ahead of the game, and we have to continue ways to keep attracting visitors into the state, not only here in Chicago, but around the state day in and day out. And so it's important that we do that. And we work quite closely with our 40 certified convention and visitor bureaus on the domestic front. On the international front, it's potentially looking further at new markets to help promote in India and Brazil, Latin America. It all comes down to dollars and cents and the ability for us to grow. But consistently working with individuals and organizations around the state to look at that next new product. And we have to keep our eye on the prize, because the tourism industry is quite competitive. And once you lose a visitor, it's very hard to get it back. And we have a lot of great things happening for us in the state, but if we don't continue to invest and create, we could lose it.
Okay, and our last question came in via the internet from Michael Hardy, who's affiliated with HINTS, H-I-N-T-S. Here's his question. New York has I Love New York. Michigan has Pure Michigan. What does Illinois have as a catchy, says-it-all slogan? And let me add this, Corey. If that's what I thought. If Ken Bennett could get his son to do something, would you accept his phone call?
Oh, Ken and I talk more to each other than we probably want to talk to each other. Ken and I are busy doing other things, unfortunately. Look, people bring up the Pure Michigan brand to me, and I'm very good friends with the state travel director in Michigan. The great thing is we have consistently outperformed the Pure Michigan brand for decades. We welcome more visitors and more visitor expenditure than any other state in the Midwest and the Great Lakes states. And the new campaign that we have now, Illinois, we asked the question, Illinois, are you up for amazing, has been done with in terms of extensive research in key markets around the Midwest and around the country and around the world. And to be honest with you, when our teams at our creative agency was coming up with our new message, this is not what I wanted. And I said, whichever message performs the best, that's what we're going with. And this is what performed the best and that I have embraced and adopted. And we look forward to a little competitive rivalry with our friends in New York and in Michigan. So,
great. Let's give Corey a big round of applause.
Thank you so much.
The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members, leaders in business, education, law, medicine, and other fields from across Illinois.
I'm Mark Beal, Executive Director of the Chemical Industry Council of Illinois. We represent over 220 companies, employing almost 46,000 people at over 700 facilities located across Illinois. These are the kind of jobs any state would wish to have, with an average annual wage of over $81,000 per year. To keep these kind of quality jobs in Illinois means we need to keep a competitive business climate with other states. Our tax rates, regulations, transportation infrastructure, the quality and education of our workers, these factors all combine to create a climate that's going to attract new businesses or in some cases keep them away. That's why the Chemical Industry Council of Illinois supports the work of the Illinois Channel. They bring us into the Capitol to hear debate on such issues as reforming the workers' compensation system, health care reform, and the debate over changing the state's pensions. These are among the issues covered by the Illinois Channel that affect all of us. Taken together, they create a business climate that will keep the Illinois economy growing or cause it to slip into further decline. That's why we all need to know what's happening on policy issues affecting our state and our communities. That's why I watch the Illinois Channel, and I hope you do too. The Illinois Channel. It works for all of us.
Next, from Springfield, we talked to Dick Lockhar, a 94-year-old lobbyist and World War II vet with over 60 years' experience in Illinois government as he approaches retirement. This runs about 15 minutes.
Dick Lockhar, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel. I hope it won't be the last time, but I guess the whole Capitol is going to be saying, in a way, goodbye to you after your having been a lobbyist here for something like close to 60 years. This is going to be your last legislative session, right?
What I say is I've been here for 10 governors, 4 of whom have gone to jail, 2 because they were bad actors as a governor, and 2 after they left the governorship. So yes, I've been here and seen a lot of people come and go. At least I've seen 10 governors come and go. It's been a very interesting experience. When I started in '59, I was young then. I'm now almost 94. But it has been exceedingly, it's difficult to describe, as a matter of fact. And people sometimes ask me, well, what was the most exciting thing and what was the best thing? It's really hard to separate things, but what I've tried to do is to point out that the legislature is a great kind of meeting places for issues. We live in a very complex state of Illinois. No, there's no question about that. The legislators do the best they can, I think, about representing their constituents. There's 59 state senators, but each senator has 210,000 constituents. That's a large city for one senator. There's 59 senators. Every one of them has at least 220,000 constituents. A state representative is half that number. Still a large city. If it was separate, it's over 100,000. So the average citizen of Illinois does not realize the complexity, shall we say, that are faced by a senator who has 220,000 people in his or her district that he has to reconcile their concern. He's also got to look at the state as a whole. What is good for the state? What is necessary? What is not necessary? He's got to make he or she has to make a lot of decisions with respect to the state, balancing off with he feels is the correct decisions for the people in his districts. None of those things are very easy, and every legislator, as you and I know, has to go through the trial and tribulations of 2 elections, the primary election, the general election. All those are time-consuming, costly, and all very demanding of everything that a candidate will need to provide if he wants to be a state legislator. Not easy, folks.
Now, you came in when Governor Stratton was the governor of, and you said 10 governors you've come and gone or over the years that you've been lobbying. What governors in your mind stand out as having been exceptional?
Well, the one that I point to is Governor Ogilvie. He only had 1 term. He was a Republican from Cook County, and he came, and I can remember very vividly, he said to the legislature, we cannot pay for the expenses of this state by increasing the sales tax every year. This state needs an income tax. Didn't have one in 1969. His first session, he was elected in 68. His first year was 69. He explained to everybody in the legislature they had to pass an income tax. He thought it would survive constitutional challenges. And I would just say the legislature was controlled by the Republicans, both House and Senate. Senator Errington was a very conservative Republican from Evanston, who was president of the Senate. Governor Ogilvie says, Russ, you're going to be the Senate sponsor of this. And Ralph Smith also is a conservative Republican from Granite City area, Madison County, Alton. He said, Ralph, you're going to be the House sponsor of this legislation. And that's the way it went forward. He said in front of everybody, we will be defeated the next election. And that's also the way it happened. He was defeated by a guy named Walker, who later went to jail, not while he was in office, but as something he did as a civilian. I think it was some financial institution. He made some misstep. But anyway, that was a period. We had a governor who up front knew what the state needed. It was painful, and he knew it would cost him and his party control, but he was absolutely correct. The state had to have an income tax, and the only way it would happen is if there was strong political leadership, and he provided that. Now, I often looked at his background. He was an attorney, and he got elected to some of the offices in Cook County, but in World War II, he was an officer, combat officer, and was wounded. In other words, in World War II, he had to make life and death decisions, and made those. Almost cost him his life on the battlefields of Germany. So he came with a certain experience in putting everything on the line, so to speak. And we've not had that kind of a situation. We have not had that kind of a governor since. But that was what stands out in my long life as a lobbyist here in Springfield.
Let me ask you, Dick, as a lobbyist, and you've worked on a lot of issues over the last 60 years, what victories that you have had lobbying, are there any that stand out in your mind?
Well, the one that comes out is I was a newly selected lobbyist by the Illinois Credit Union League, and they had a piece of legislation they wanted to pass. It rewritten the laws, state laws at the time regarding credit unions. They wanted some changes, some recodification of their legislative initiative. So they concocted a bill to make the codification take place, making some improvements in their ability to serve their members. The Bankers Association, there were two Bankers Association at the time, Community Bankers and the Illinois Bankers. They both got together and did everything they could to defeat the credit union legislation. It was a real experience for me because it was we had to generate our grassroots, the actual members of a credit union, to convey to their legislators what this legislation did and did not do, and they worked very hard to get the support of the rank and file legislators, both House and Senate, and we passed recodification for credit union. It was a real tough battle, but it was done and demonstrated to me a lesson that if you get the people participating in a given cause, a good cause that can be defended, those kind of advocates, amateur advocates, can prevail.
Yeah, and a lot of times people think that they can't have an impact, but they can, certainly when they're making their voices heard.
They had to get some advice from myself about what to do and when to do it. But they did their duty, which I could not do as well as they could.
And speaking of doing their duty, I'll remind people, if they haven't heard of you before, that you were in the Army during World War II. You fought in the Battle of the Bulge and were captured and spent about 4 months as a prisoner of war. We're coming up on the, 74th or 73rd anniversary.
Saturday, yeah.
Yeah, but I was thinking of December. We're coming up on the 73rd anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. 16th.
19th was the
16th was the when the battle started. Let me ask you, you're retiring now at 94. Why 30 years about? 30 years after most other people would retire. That's for a lot of people an entire career right there.
I have a good reason.
Why? I was going to say, why did you keep working so long?
Well, I enjoy the challenges of it, and I felt a responsibility. I represent mostly not-for-profit organizations, and the Mental Health Association, school psychologists, and others. But the time has come, the parts are wearing out in my body. I don't see good, and I have to drive from Chicago to Springfield. That's 6 hours every week. It's a draining experience. My hearing is about gone, and I wear hearing aids, but they're not good enough. So it's fortunately my legs are I'm still basically in the infantry as I was back in 1940s. But eyes and ears are such that I cannot do a good job anymore. I have to be able to hear debates. I have to be able to hear questions and answers to legislation. So I'm going back home. I'm not going to Florida. I'm going to continue to live in Chicago. I'm going to try to compile a lobbying guide if I can find the time and stick with it to draft a lobbying guide to help organizations and people and encourage them to be advocates for themselves and to come down in Springfield. It's an interesting, stimulating, and demanding experience.
Dick, as we tape this, I think you're going to be honored in part for Veterans Day coming up and honored in the Senate. And also, I'm sure they'll be mindful of all your 60 years of dedication covering the public policy here. It's been an honor to know you, and hopefully we can get together frequently. I'm sure everyone in the building here will be missing seeing Dick Lockhar walking around the stairs.
It won't be reciprocal.
Dick Lockhar still.
I don't want to drive. I don't want to drive for 6 hours every week just to walk around the Capitol building. It has a stimulating occasions, but I'm 94, and I would like to do something else in my remaining days.
I'll close out. You and I were walking to your house about 6 years ago from the Loop, and it was about a mile and a half walk. And I'll tell people, you're about 30 years older than I, and I had a hard time keeping up with you. So I still tell people, when I grow up, I want to be Dick Lockhar.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. You do a great job here in interpreting what some of these complex issues and the politics of it all. So I urge the listeners to your channel to keep going and for you to keep going as well. And I hope to provide some tangible help, as a matter of fact.
Thanks so much, Dick.
Next, from Springfield, we sit down with Brooke Simpson, author of Ulysses S. Grant, Triumph Over Adversity, 1822 to 1865. This runs about 40 minutes.
Brooke Simpson, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Glad to be here.
You are the author of Ulysses S. Grant, Triumph Over Adversity, 1822 to 1865. Ulysses S. Grant was arguably one of the most famous people of the 19th century, and yet today a lot of people probably have heard of him, but maybe really don't know a heck of a lot about him and why he matters so much. Why does Ulysses S. Grant matter?
Grant's a key figure in American history in the 19th century. He's the general that brings the Civil War to a successful conclusion for the United States. Later, he serves 2 terms as president at a time when the nation was trying to come back together and try to find a path towards racial justice for the recently freed African Americans. So he's a key figure. People realized that at the time. To some extent, they still understand that today.
Grant was born where?
Grant was born in Point Pleasant, Ohio in 1822. He was the son of a businessman, a tanner, Jesse Grant. Point Pleasant is just off the Ohio River. Moved to a little town, Georgetown, and grew up there in Ohio. When he was a young man, at 17, he goes off to West Point, the United States Military Academy, graduates in the middle of his class in 1843. Several years later, participates in the Mexican-American War and acquits himself well under fire. Marries Julia Dent, slaveholder's daughter, lives in Missouri, south of St. Louis. They'll have 4 children over the course of their marriage. 1852, he goes to the West Coast. He misses his wife, his first and second born sons. In 1854, resigns from the Army, returns to Missouri, tries his hand at a number of business enterprises. He's not very successful, in part because of his health and in part because of the economic conditions of the country at that time with the Panic of 1857. Moves to Illinois in 1860, goes to Galena, northwest corner of the state, to work as a clerk in his father's general store. And that's where we find him when the war breaks out in 1861.
I want to spend more of the time, obviously, on his career and his successes as a general, which, but on one hand, it seems to me it might be that Grant could apply to people today, because as your book says, triumph over adversity. Grant did okay in the Army. He, as you say, went to West Point and fought in the Mexican War of the 1840s. He, on the other hand, when he left the Army to come back, didn't like being separated from his family, had a good decade of his life where it was just a struggle for him, or 8 years or so where it was an extreme struggle, barely getting by, failing time after time at different venues. And then it seems as if the war breaking out between the states is what really saved him. When he went to his father's place in Galena, it was really more, wasn't it, out of desperation that he had basically failed at everything else, and so his family kind of gave him a job just so he could feed his family at that point?
He struggled at all sorts of occupations when he was in St. Louis. He worked his in-laws' farm for a while. That didn't work. He was a real estate agent for a while. That didn't work. All sorts of things just didn't work for him, in part because I don't think he was a very sharp businessman. He was too trusting and sometimes too gullible. So yes, in 1860, something he never thought he would do, he went to work for his father, and his father thought, well, I'll bring him in the business, but he never saw in his son the future businessman that he saw in his other sons who were also in Galena. So it was a humbling experience for him to go to Illinois.
So he comes to Illinois, and when is that, 1859?
1859, 1860. So he's certainly working at the store at that time with the election of 1860.
And then at some point he actually comes here to Springfield. Then he goes to the old state capitol. We're just about a block or two away from the old state capitol. And he seeks a commission to kind of get back into the Army. Who did he talk to, and how did that go?
Well, when war breaks out in April 1861, people do realize that Grant has military experience, including his hometown congressman, Elihu B. Washburn. Grant drills a company from Galena, accompanies them down here, and then seeks jobs out helping the war effort, works in the old state capitol, filling out forms, helping to organize Illinois' forces for the war. He is looking for a commission. He thought that perhaps given his military experience he might be fit to be a colonel. But he didn't have a lot of luck at first, though Washburn lobbied for him a little bit, and he got to know Governor Richard Yates. It's only when there was an unruly Illinois regiment that was almost on the point of mutiny against its colonel that Grant was called to head the 21st Illinois.
And because of all of his career, we're going to have to move fastly through it, and obviously people hopefully will pick up your book and get all the details. But one of his early victories, and Grant really had pretty much a succession of victories, but was at Fort Donelson, right? Mm-hmm. What was the Battle of Fort Donelson, and how did he showcase his talents as a commander at that early battle?
Fort Donelson, the Confederates build a brace of forts where the Cumberland and Tennessee rivers cross from Kentucky into Tennessee. In February 1862, Grant moves down with a naval flotilla supporting him to take those forts. And Fort Henry, the first falls without much opposition on February 6th. In fact, the Navy actually captures Fort Henry. Then Grant wires back to his superior officer, Henry Halleck, that he'll go across and just take Fort Donelson. Well, that proved a little harder nut to crack than Grant had anticipated, and that, in fact, at one point, the Confederate forces, seeing themselves surrounded by Grant's men, tried to break out a surprise attack that at first caught the Union forces off balance, caught Grant off balance. Grant was visiting his naval counterpart, who was recovering from a wound suffered in the bombardment on Fort Donelson. Grant came back, seized the situation up very quickly, ordered other commanders to counterattack, reasoning that the lines must be weakly held elsewhere, while rallying his men, understanding that it was an escape attempt, not an attempt to win a battlefield victory, and push back. So this is a case where, faced with chaos, defeat, rout, he was able to take stock of everything and rally people and get the job done. And when the garrison at Fort Donelson surrenders, it's the largest surrender of enemy forces to an American general to that time. And he had demanded of the fort's commander the unconditional and immediate surrender of that post. Northern newspapers grabbed a hold of that, looked at those first two initials, U.S., called him Unconditional Surrender Grant. And though he's a pipe smoker, during the battle, he directs his forces using the stump of a cigar, and Americans looking to pay tribute to their new military leader deluge him with boxes of cigars, and he becomes an inveterate cigar smoker. Cigar smoking, that, of course, contributed to his throat cancer late in life.
Yeah, I guess he would smoke, he would almost chain smoke cigars, I think, during the war, would he not?
Yeah, there's a story that during the Battle of the Wilderness, first engagement he has in Virginia, that he leaves headquarters in the morning with 24 cigars in his pocket. At the end of the day, he's talking to another general. He decides to offer him a cigar, and he finds he only has one left. So I think the cigars acted as a sedative, calmed him down. Often he could retreat into his private thoughts while he was quietly smoking.
The character of Grant, there's a kind of a dichotomy. On one hand, we have this man who had leadership capabilities, as you alluded to in the Battle of Fort Donelson. I guess calm under pressure, persistence. On the other hand, there's some question about, was he an honest man? Questions come up in the presidency, which is going to be in volume 2 of your book. Mm-hmm. Was he an honest man? Was he a drunkard? How smart was he? When you analyze him as an individual and the qualities of his personality, what are his weaknesses and what are his strengths?
Well, I think he is an honest individual, honest to the point, again, of being gullible and naive at sometimes, because he trusts other people because he thinks they'll act upon the same understanding of what's good and honest as he does. As far as alcohol goes, Grant clearly has what I think we'd call a relationship with alcohol. I think it's debatable as to whether he was alcohol dependent or an alcoholic. He himself reflected that sometimes he could consume a significant quantity of alcohol without having it show any impact at all, any effect. Other times, one drink, and he would show the effect a great deal. I think in the 19th century, the issue is not whether men drank. Most men did. But whether they could so-called hold their liquor. And Grant could not always hold his liquor, and I think that's where the issue of his becoming a drunkard comes.
That was more when he was, I think, in the state of Washington, wasn't it? When he was separated from his family? Or was
when he was on the West Coast, that first became an issue. And it probably contributed to his resignation from the Army in 1854. He had a superior officer out there with whom he did not get along, and alcohol, I think, played a role in that decision to resign. But a lot of that drinking can be attributed to both loneliness and the fact that he wasn't feeling well. And that's another thing we overlook when we look at the 19th century. Alcohol is the remedy for everything. And for Grant, it was a really unfortunate remedy because he suffered from migraine headaches, and people would suggest that he drink to take the edge off the headache. Actually, that's the worst thing you can do when you have a migraine headache. And so there are times that we know that Grant's not feeling well, he takes a drink, and actually it makes things worse. So I think the reputation as Grant being a drunkard is greatly overblown. On the other hand, those historians and biographers who deny that Grant had a relationship with alcohol that was often detrimental to his career. I think they're wrong as well. The charge you could always bring against Grant was that he was a drunkard. And how could you trust the lives of Union soldiers to such a man? And that dogged him for his military career. It's something that his superiors, including Abraham Lincoln, were intensely interested in finding more out about, whether this man could control himself if you're going to allow him to control armies.
Was there ever any example of him being, during the Civil War, was there any example or questions about whether he was drunk on duty?
Critics would raise these allegations. They raised them after Shiloh. Someone raised them in northern Mississippi in September of 1862. But there's no evidence that alcohol impaired his ability to command on the battlefield. Alcohol may, on the other hand, have contributed to some other incidents, including an accident in New Orleans in September 1863, in which his horse threw him, and there's some speculation as to whether Grant had mounted this rather lively horse in less than full sobriety, let's put it that way. And when you're the commanding general, though, even if the battle isn't on, you still have to be ready to do things. And every once in a while, I think you could argue that Grant, even when things seem quiet, you always have to be ready in case something happens. That happened to Grant several times, after all, Donelson, Shiloh, and other places. And so I think the argument that, well, when Grant drank, it's when it was safe to do so, I think that's overblown, because in some sense it's never safe for a commander to be incapacitated when he has such responsibilities on his shoulders.
The Battle of Shiloh in Tennessee came 1862?
That's correct.
And what was that, a success or a failure for Grant?
A little bit of each. Confederate forces after Fort Donelson gathered to drive Grant out of western Tennessee before other Union armies can reinforce him for an invasion of Mississippi. And they attack in the early morning hours of April 6th, 1862. Union forces are not prepared for this attack. They have not been fortified. They're raw troops. Grant has been drilling them, teaching them how to load and fire their weapons. So there are a lot of soldiers out there who've never seen combat before.
They're basically just farmers who volunteered. Right?
That's correct. So a lot of raw troops. The Confederate assault is successful at breaking those Union lines, driving Union forces from their camps back to a steamboat landing. Grant, who was not present at the battlefield at the beginning, he had put his headquarters elsewhere because he was waiting for the other generals to arrive, comes on the field, starts rallying his men, feeds ammunition, anticipates reinforcements, and by the end of the day, the Union forces have staved off a final Confederate assault. Next day, reinforced, Grant counterattacks and drives the Confederates back. So on one hand, looks like a victory. On the other hand, the casualties at Shiloh, more than Americans had ever seen before, shocked, mortified the American public. People looked for someone to blame, and Grant was a target of such criticism, and not entirely unjustifiably so. That after all, it had been his negligence and the negligence of others that had put Union forces in a precarious position in the first place. So there was some argument about replacing Grant or putting him aside. Their superior officer, Henry Alec, comes down and shells him by making him second in command, but with no actual responsibilities in that position. And Grant, for a while there, looked like he might just fade out of the war, having been a flash in the pan.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't some people talk about having him fired because of the casualties?
Yes, I mean, and understandably so, again, that these casualties were tremendous. Americans were not used to having such quantities of bloodshed. By the end of the war, they understood that Shiloh, while horrific in terms of its human cost, paled besides other battles that took place during the next several years of conflict.
When we go into the war, both sides thought this was going to be a relatively quick battle, and in fact, famously, people from Washington at the first Battle of Bull Run rode out to watch it almost as if it was a sporting event, and then saw the Union forces routed and people the spectators as well as the Army, the Union Army, fled in terror, running back to Washington, basically. So in 1862, they still had not, as you mentioned, been really accustomed to this level of violence. No one in the history of the United States thus far in any of our wars where they had incurred so many people being killed, nor had the battles really been fought, except in the Northeast, going back to the Revolutionary War, on American soil. So here we had these battles destroying American property, farms. It would come to destroy cities, such as Atlanta. But as the war progressed and Grant was fighting in the West, Lincoln was obviously back east in Washington, went through a series of commanders. He said a lot of them had the case of the slows, that they just wouldn't seek out the enemy and take the battle to him. Was that Grant's greatest tribute as a general, that he wasn't afraid to fight and that he was dogmatic about taking the battle to the enemy?
I think Lincoln and others appreciate that Grant was an aggressive general, that Grant took the initiative, that Grant understood that there were moments in a battle where who moved first, next, would get the upper hand, and he was determined to be that person. So Lincoln observed that when it came to actual fighting, Grant was somebody who would do that, and that wasn't always the case with his generals elsewhere.
When you investigate as a biographer someone's life, so how would you assess a Grant? In other words, in terms, was he a great strategist? Was he a great tactician? Or was it merely that he was the dog that wouldn't let go of the cuff and just kept doggedly bringing the battle to the South and wearing them down?
I think he was a fairly able strategist. I think he knew how to move armies around on a map. I think he understood logistics very well. He had been a quartermaster, a commissary officer during the Mexican-American War, so he understood the importance of supply for his army and the importance of denying logistical support to the enemy army. So in that sense, I think he understood war very well. Tactically, he was not nearly as skilled. Most 19th century generals, most Civil War generals, in fact, were not. And I'm not sure that was all terribly important, because most Civil War battles were, in fact, bloody slugfests in which the victor suffered just about as much as the defeated. I think Grant's determination, perseverance are characteristics that many people highlighted at the time. I also think that one thing, though, that separated Grant from a lot of his contemporaries was his ability to work with his civilian superiors and understand the larger issues of the war. That Grant, who originally had been hesitant to strike at slavery because it was an institution that if attacked would embitter white Southerners and draw out the war, by the middle of the war he understands that attacking slavery is attacking the foundation of the Confederacy. It's essential for victory. Using African Americans in the ranks of the Union armies increases the size of those armies and to some degree their effectiveness. Was
he in favor of that? Was he in favor of bringing the Negro to the battle?
By 1863, he is an advocate of enlisting African Americans in the armies of the United States, so he is certainly in step with administration policy. I think the other thing, though, that you got to appreciate about Grant during this time is he does know how to work with the boss. He does know how to write letters to Lincoln to reassure him what's going on, keep him informed. He understood the pressures under which Lincoln was operating, and he understood also how to deal with Lincoln's concerns. Lincoln, for example, was concerned about whether any of his generals might be a potential political opponent in the election of 1864. Grant understood this. So he made sure to send letters to intermediaries that stated his lack of interest in pursuing a national political career, that all he wanted to do was fight the war out. He made sure that Lincoln saw those letters and reassured Lincoln that could support Grant and forge a command team that proved essential to Union victory.
One of the biases that everyone who reads history has to contend with is we know what happened. And yet you have to read history with the understanding of looking at the decisions that were made in the context that those people making those decisions at that time did not know what was going to happen. They didn't know the outcome. People think today, well, of course, the Union won the war against the South. There was the Battle of Shiloh, which, or not Shiloh, but Vicksburg, which Grant, a siege he laid to Vicksburg, starved the population out. And it was one of the great victories that followed the day after the great victory at Gettysburg. So you had on July the 3rd, 1863, Gettysburg. On July the 4th, 1863, Vicksburg surrenders to Grant.
Correct.
Those two victories, it seems to me, really gave President Lincoln the political muscle that he needed to continue on to be his reelection. That, am I right that those victories are what started to turn the attitude of the American people that yet maybe we can win this, maybe we can hold the Union together, and maybe this immense loss of life is going to be producing the fruits of victory?
Well, I mean, that's, I think, what we see in hindsight, but it's not clear that that was the case.
Well, and I wanted to say in that, how close did we come as the Union? How close did they come to losing the war?
I think they came very close, and I think, in fact, the closest they came was during 1864. That'd be after Gettysburg and Vicksburg. Well, Gettysburg is primarily important for stopping Lee's invasion at high cost to both armies. To some extent, the Army of Northern Virginia never recovered from the extent of the casualties it suffered at Gettysburg, not only in terms of its men, but also in its command structure that had finished months of decimating Confederate commanders, starting with Lee's Lieutenant Stonewall Jackson at Chancellorsville. So I think it costs a lot. But in the aftermath of that battle, when George Gordon Meade, at the head of the Army of the Potomac, pursues Lee, but not as energetically as some people would have liked, people see Gettysburg as a missed opportunity. When Lincoln goes to Gettysburg in November, the Gettysburg Address, he talks about the unfinished work before us, that there are things we need to do. And so Gettysburg is seen as important, but a missed opportunity that could have been even more important. Vicksburg, on the other hand, I think for all the talk about dividing the Confederacy in two and taking 30,000 Confederates off the board, is really important because it solidified Grant's standing. People stopped whispering quite so much about Grant. They began to understand that whatever their previous doubts, he was a very successful commander. And among those people was Abraham Lincoln, who began to see in Grant now the general who might just be able to win the war. But I think even in 1864, with Grant as General-in-Chief, after a spring of bloody campaigning in Georgia and Virginia, with Union armies seemingly stuck outside of Richmond, Petersburg, Atlanta, Lincoln himself fears for his reelection chances. In late August, he actually writes a memorandum, folds it up, asks his cabinet members to sign it without reading the contents of the memo. The memo says that he thinks he might lose the war. And he certainly is going to lose the election, is what he thinks. And he's trying to commit them. In fact, if we lose this election, we have to try to win the war, because if my opponent becomes president, I don't think we're going to win this conflict. We see Lincoln as a very astute political operator, a man who understood public opinion and the temper of the times. If Lincoln thought that he was going to be defeated in 1864, he must have had some good reason for believing that.
Lincoln in 1864 runs against McClellan, who had been the initial general leading the Union forces. And McClellan, as I understand it, the policies would have been that keeping the South isn't worth the slaughter of so many Americans. He was more the peace candidate. Is that a fair assumption, or is that a misunderstanding?
That's a misunderstanding of George McClellan. It's not a misunderstanding of many of his supporters in the Democratic Party, including the Copperheads, who were very much opposed to the prosecution of the war and adamant in their opposition to emancipation. McClellan himself was pledged to carry on the war. He did not have the commitment, however, that the Lincoln administration had to the destruction of slavery. McClellan didn't like slavery, but he didn't see that the war measures of the Lincoln administration were actually constructive. Lincoln's point was not that he thought McClellan would sue for peace, but that rather McClellan would have gotten victory with the support of people who would have sued for peace, and McClellan would find himself in an untenable position if he did not heed their advice. So I think we can understand that George McClellan was not advocating a peaceful settlement that recognized an independent Confederacy. But many of his supporters did believe that that was the way to go.
I'm going to rush through the end of the war here. So after Vicksburg, is that what really sealed the deal as far as selecting Grant to become the leader of the Union forces?
That and Chattanooga, and at the same time Lincoln's assessment that in the Eastern Theater, that while George Meade was a capable commander, Meade was probably not tough enough or able enough to defeat Robert E. Lee.
Much of the battles, you have Sherman taking the South, dividing the South. As Vicksburg gave the Union forces control of the Mississippi, so Texas, among the other Confederate states, were isolated from the rest of the Confederacy. Sherman's going down to the sea, his march to the sea, and divides the Confederacy again. Mm-hmm. But you then have Grant in much of 1864 battling around Richmond. One of the battles that people look at, and one of the criticisms of Grant, was Cold Harbor. Mm-hmm. And they basically would be saying that this shows that Grant is just a butcher, that he didn't really care about human life. What happened at Cold Harbor that brought about that criticism? After all, he had seemed to prove himself a good general up to that point. And to what extent is that a fair criticism or not?
Well, Cold Harbor is the culmination of the first 40 days or so of the, really the first 30 days of the overland campaign that Grant conducts against Lee in central Virginia in 1864. So for about 30 days, Grant and Lee are going head-to-head with the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, tremendously bloody battles for both sides. Grant is convinced by the beginning of June, as his men are now approaching the outskirts of the Confederate capital at Richmond, he's convinced that the Confederate Army is about to crack, that they've shown signs that perhaps they're no longer the fighting force they once were. There was some truth to that, but it could be exaggerated, and it certainly was. At the same time, he had a command problem, and that George Gordon Meade actually retained field command of the Army of the Potomac. Grant accompanied Meade, but Grant, in fact, was the commander-in-chief, the general-in-chief of all the armies of the United States. And so he supervised Meade. Sometimes Meade thought it was a rather uncomfortable, too close supervision. But in fact, Meade in late May basically asserted command of the Army again. And Grant let him because he felt that Meade knew the generals in the Army of the Potomac better than Grant did. It was Meade who was actually in operational command of Union forces at Cold Harbor. We know this, in fact, from Meade's own correspondence with his wife the day after the battle. He proclaimed that he was on command. He was in command of the field all day, and Grant just visited him a few times. What happens at Cold Harbor, it's a bloody repulse. The Union forces did not attack in coordinated or cooperating fashion. The Confederates were well dug in. They had become masters at field fortifications and making them in a fairly short period of time.
So the Southern forces were mostly fighting a defensive battle, right?
By this time, but they had set up a position where they could lay down a lethal fire on advancing Union forces. And again, the Union forces had not scouted the terrain, they had not reconnoitered it, they did not act in cooperative fashion, and so the assault was a disaster. But in terms of what we know about Cold Harbor, the losses became greatly exaggerated. We know from recent studies that about 3,500 to 4,000 men probably fell in those assaults. That's regrettable. But it's about half as many men as fell at Pickett's charge on July 3rd, 1863. So if Grant's a butcher, then what do we call Lee? What's interesting, though, is that in the aftermath of this futile assault, and it was futile, Grant himself expressed in his memoirs regret that he'd ever ordered the last assault because it could do no good, and he regretted the bloodshed. Cold Harbor assumed mythical proportions and became, in the minds of many people then and now, to represent the entire campaign, to the point that you have stories of 7,000 men falling in 20 or 30 minutes. That's been discounted, but sometimes Grant found myth hard to shake. Again, the myth that he was an alcoholic, the myth that he was a butcher insensitive to the suffering of his men and the like. Grant remains, in the popular mind, a lot of times a fairly misunderstood person because these myths proved durable, even if their factual basis was less than firm.
So the war basically comes to an end in more or less April of 1865. There were still some Confederate, after Lee surrenders, there's still some Confederates fighting in the field. I believe the very last battle was in Texas or so around June of 1865, if I recall. But basically, for practical purposes, it ends. Lincoln is assassinated. Andrew Johnson becomes president. Reconstruction, we could spend obviously hours on all these topics. But it leads to, and I just want to get to actually what is going to be your next book, what happens after the war's end. Grant becomes president in 1860, elected in 1868. He's reelected in 1872. I told you off camera before that I was surprised to learn until just recently, I had not been aware that he sought the presidency again in 1880. And I thought it was that he had not really enjoyed the presidency. So to what extent did Grant enjoy being president? And if he didn't enjoy it, why did he seek the presidency again in 1880?
Well, I mean, I think we're talking about three separate situations. In 1868, Grant runs for president because he feels obligated to, that he believes.
Was there a clamor for him to run?
There's certainly a lot of talk about him becoming president, a man who could solve problems, a man who could bring peace to the nation, bring order, protect African-American rights and the like. People placed tremendous expectations on him, and he made it clear to others, including Sherman, that he felt that it was his duty to run in order to preserve what he called the fruits of victory. And he wanted to make sure that political wrangling did not sacrifice those results.
And the country was really torn apart at that point, right?
Yes.
I mean, they had tried to impeach Andrew Johnson, and you still had this divide about how to handle the victory of the Civil War and which the policy positions, because obviously we didn't have Lincoln there to guide us through the Reconstruction period.
Right, and much like George Washington had to serve in President to solidify what he had accomplished by being a victorious general during the American Revolution, Grant felt he had to do the same sort of thing. In 1872, I think Grant, understanding now he was the target of partisan attacks, some fair, some unfair, sought re-election in part as a form of personal vindication and went so far to mention that motive in his second inaugural address. So I think then he wanted to win badly. In 1880, he'd gone around the world on a trip after he left the White House in 1877. I think he began to see the Republican Party was once again in trouble. His friends told him that he could win renomination easily and that he could run for a third term. Grant wasn't so sure, kept on pressing his advisors, are you sure that I can get the nomination? It's going to be much of a struggle. I don't think Grant would have wanted that nomination nearly as much as, let's say, he wanted re-election in 1872. But he did think that he still had a role to play. So did he like being president? Not really, because he came under more criticism during that time of his life than at any other. But did he feel a sense of obligation and duty? Yes. And that led him to make some interesting decisions that were not always the decisions he would have made if he just consulted his personal desires.
Time grows short, and we could talk much longer if we had the time, but we should mention, so your book that we've been primarily talking about, which was published in 2000, and to good reviews, Grant, Triumph Over Adversity, 1822 to 1865. You're now working on the second volume. And again, what is the title?
Ulysses S. Grant and the Fruits of Victory, 1865 to 1885. So we take the story from the end of the war to the end of his life.
And where would you imagine you're in what process? Are you writing? Are you still researching? Or where are you?
I'm mostly writing now and framing chapters and writing. I've done most of the research. Every once in a while you find something and you might want to go back to an archive to check a few things or explore a new collection. But the research is basically done. And the argument of the book is that we should see the last 20 years of Grant's life as a unified whole, in which Grant tries to define what does Union victory mean first as a commanding general during Reconstruction, then as 8 years as president, and then even his personal memoirs, telling the story of the war from his perspective to try to say, this is what we tried to achieve and this is what we did achieve.
And you imagine in a couple of years that'll be out?
I certainly hope so.
When you look back overall, how do you not fall in love with the individual that you're researching because you spend so much of your own personal life as a biographer with this individual? How do you maintain the objectivity as a biographer, as a writer of history, to assess the qualities, and to what extent is this person someone who should be lauded, and to what extent should they be critical?
I think you have to remember you are not that person. That your mission as a biographer is not to rehabilitate. It's not to rescue. It's not necessarily to denigrate either. Your obligation is to try to understand somebody as a human being, warts and all. And you know, as you point out, and I've said this before, it's really bad business to fall in love with dead people. It's also, by the way, bad business as a biographer to have such vicious hatred for somebody that you can't draw back. But I view this more in terms of an umpire or referee at a sporting event, baseball, hockey, whatever, and saying, okay, you've made a mistake here. I will call them as I see them. And I think Grant's mistakes are just as instructive in understanding the man as are his successes.
When we read your biography, we can do it as readers over a relatively short period of time. You will have spent years with this person. Does Grant hold your attention, or is there some point where it's a labor where you have to force yourself to continue to mine this, plow this field of research and write about it?
Well, I think I took a break in part after the first volume because I did want to get away from Grant, and because it seemed that now, after I had written some books on Grant, all of a sudden became a popular and, in fact, safe topic for some biographers. And we've had several biographies of Grant come out, very highly laudatory. They laud him a great deal, let's put it that way. The laudatory accounts, I think, also praise him for good intentions, praise him for being on the right side of history and the like. I think in many cases are insufficiently critical of his shortcomings and are a little too enamored with this theme of rehabilitation. So I wanted to get some distance away from Grant. I had other projects in which I was interested and pursued. And I wanted to do a lot of thinking about how I would deal with those last 20 years because I know that that second volume is going to be seen by many people as my last word of Grant.
Well, Brooks Simpson, it'd be great to talk longer. Maybe we can do that again, but we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.